Good morning, everybody. I'm Kasha Singh. I am the current board president, but only for 10 days. Right, Mike? Where are you? Just a few announcements from the board this week. General Assembly is this week in Portland, and Reverend Zachary will be going, so he's not going to be in the office this week. Next Sunday is a virtual service online, so we will not be meeting here. Just go to the webpage or check the beacon for the link, and you can tune in. They're going to be doing the General Assembly service, and it ought to be really dynamic and very, very cool. Our hearts are saddened this morning to hear that member Brian Leakley has passed away. Reverend Zachary sent a note to the community, all of us, in the past few days. The family is grieving. It was somewhat unexpected, and they will decide about a memorial at a later date. Please keep his family in your thoughts and hearts. And immediately after service today is the year-end board Q&A. This is something we're doing. This is the last Sunday we'll be together, and we just had a congregational meeting. And if anybody has questions, a few of us board members are going to be gathering in the library after, so come join us and ask any questions you have. And as always, it's wonderful to see you all here today. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Herb Heathcote, and I'm pleased to be serving as the worship associate this morning, alongside our guest speaker, Earl Canfield. Earl's the founder and volunteer executive director of Answer Nepal, an organization devoted to providing a good education to bright and disadvantaged Nepali students. Many members of Cedars, including my wife Leslie and I, have sponsored Answer students. Today is Juneteenth, which commemorates the abolition of slavery in the U.S. We join in this celebration of African American freedom. Today is also Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all fathers with us today. Thanks to the sound team and the tech team. They do a great job as usual. And special thanks to the setup team who recruited replacements for those who couldn't come today to help because of COVID. Before we move into our service, I want to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point Point treaties. We affirm the indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, in the beauty of who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and spiritual and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. Let us prepare for the service by listening to the prelude, Summer's Nocturne, performed by Audrey Blair. Leslie and I have sponsored Answer students in Nepal for over 20 years. Answer is the acronym for American Nepali Student and Women's Educational Relief. When I visited Nepal in 2012, I met the Answer staff there and attended a Saturday session in which Answer students come together to watch a movie in English and then talk about it in English. This is a special program to develop the skills beyond the classroom for the Answer students, and it gives them practice in using the English that they're learning in their schools. The movie during my visit was Pinocchio. So there was a lot of talk about Jiminy Cricket as Pinocchio's conscience, helping him to be a real boy. But one of the things they do is when the student gets up and speaks and talks about it in English, then they get a piece of candy. And first I thought, oh, this is really not a reasonable way to do it. But in fact, it's what they need to do to get the kids speaking in English. And it is effective. At another meeting attended by...
It works on dogs, too.
So Earl says it works on dogs. He has a well-trained dog here with him today, his support dog. At another meeting attended by about 20 Answer alumni, I introduced myself and talked about my family. Then each alum told me a bit about themselves in English. So every time they had a visitor, they had to tell about themselves and practice their English. One alum, Kalwan Silwal, who is president of the Answer board in Nepal, owns a travel agency, and he did an excellent job of arranging my travel and accommodations in Nepal. I also got to meet some Answer students that we were sponsoring. In Kathmandu, I met a 7th grade student, Rekha Brahmasaka, her mother and little brother. It's always great to meet them after you've corresponded with them for a long time. I also met Namraj Giri, who was just finishing high school. He was an orphan, and he was sponsored by our son Kelsey and his wife Stacy. Namraj told me that he kept all of the family's letters to him, and sometimes he got them out and reread all of them. He didn't have a mother and father. The first letter he sent to Kelsey and Stacy was, "Dear Mother and Father." So you can really establish close connections with these students, particularly with Namraj. When I visited another of my students, Rajesh Lama near Chitwan National Park, he was a 3rd-year student in veterinary medicine, and he was looking forward to a job as a large animal vet in Nepal, and he since graduated and is working there in Nepal. Because they lived far from Kathmandu, I did not get to visit a couple of other students, Prakash Gautam, who's in 7th grade, and Bishnu Gupa, who's in 5th grade. We started supporting Bishnu in 2nd grade, and he's now an outstanding college senior studying information management. He's organized other students on projects to prepare websites for their college. There are photos of these students on the table in the back, if you want to see how they progress through time. Answer students are carefully chosen by interviewing the students, their parents, and their teachers. Consequently, Answer students are among the top scholars in Nepal, winning awards and scholarships and graduating from professional programs in law, medicine, pharmacy, public health, dentistry, veterinary medicine, business, accounting, engineering, and social work. So they go on to a variety of careers. Answer has helped over 1,500 students obtain quality education in private schools in Nepal. The government schools have 60 students per classroom. The private schools have half that many, and they have textbooks. So the education is better in the private schools. Once Answer students graduate and are earning income, then they take on the additional responsibility of paying it forward by sponsoring another Answer student themselves. The Answer staff consists primarily of its own students and graduates. They run Answer Nepal themselves, gaining work experience, becoming self-vested in helping their peers, and allaying all fears of internal corruption. This is Earl's 3rd visit as a guest speaker at Cedars, and we're delighted to have him back. I dedicate the lighting of our flaming chalice to all children of the world. Please join me in repeating our affirmation as printed in your order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. So now, I'd like to welcome Warren Reed and Shane Chandler to come up. They're sponsors of Answer Students. We're sort of celebrating Warren's finishing his job, his retirement. He's got 4 more days with the Bainbridge Island school system, and then he'll be retired. So Shane and Warren, welcome.
Hello. It's fun to be back for a bit, but just want to share our experience sponsoring an Answer Student, which has been an amazing experience actually from the beginning. So Ganesh Pudel is a fine young man that reaches out now on Facebook Messenger almost weekly. We have a short talk on the weekends usually, and he's just the sweetest kid, and really smart, doing really well in his studies, and it's just been a great experience, and we're planning on going to visit him this fall, so we're all excited. Should be a great trip, and look forward to continuing sponsoring students. I would like to do more because it's a great organization, and it feels like, the sponsorship is quite reasonable for when you get to really help someone. So, and it's a cool cultural experience as well. So, anyways, do it.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Shane and Warren. Sponsorship for elementary school students is $400 a year to give them a good education, so it is inexpensive. We'll now have a video of an Answer Student. So it'll be shown on the screen.
Namaste, I'm Mamta Thafa, and I have 4 memories in my family. My father, my mother, me and my brother. And my father, he works in an insurance company. He's a driver. And my mom, she is a housewife. She works in field as well. I study in Nepal campus. I'm studying law, and I'm in 2nd year. Answer Nepal started supporting me when I was in school, 7th grade. They're paying my fees, and they provide funds for the books and school uniforms. When I was a child, I was not aware about how many chances do I have, what are the fields that I can be in. So I also wanted to become a doctor, but later on I was not pretty much interested in the field of the medicines. In +2, then that was the time when the topic of law struck in my mind.
उसको इच्छा अनुसार अब हामीले गर्न नसक्ने, अब हाम्रो आर्थिक अवस्था कमजोरी थियो, त्यस्तो भएर नि भने जस्तो पढ्न सकिन्थेन। अब यति एनसेल नेपाली नल्याए हामी यतिसम्म पुर्याउन सकिन्थेनौँ।
Before we were in a house of brick and mud, so after the earthquake, the house was completely cracked. So we lived in a tent for about 2 months, and then we built a small cottage of bamboo and mud.
घर बनाउँदाखेरि उहाँहरूले चाहिँ सबै सामानदेखि लिएर सबै उहाँहरूले नै सहयोग गर्नुभयो, अनि झ्यालडोका चाहिँ हामी आफूले राख्ने।
All of my parents were involved, and all my friends from Answer Nepal, they didn't deny anything, to do anything. They were so much happy to help me, and I was so much surprised by the expressions. SWC means Social Welfare Club. We were in that clubs, and that club shows us movie every month, Saturdays, and whenever we are free, we used to watch the movies, and it was really fun. And before SWC, I didn't know that we could gain so much knowledge from a movie, and those movies were really inspiring and what thought-provoking movies they are. My sponsor is Karen Gold. She used to live in Seattle, but she currently moved to Hawaii. No, I haven't met her yet, but yes, of course, I would be happy to meet her someday. But we communicate through. We used to communicate through letters, but after the +2, we started communicating through emails.
यो नानीलाई पढाइदिया चाहिँ घर बनाइदिया उसमा चाहिँ यो संस्थादेखि चाहिँ म धेरै आभारी छु।
यति घर बनाउँदा नि हामीलाई धेरै धेरै ठुलो ठुलो खुसी छौँ हामी।
I want to become a lawyer, and I want to help those who are in need of the justice but cannot afford to get the justice. And also, I'm thinking of when I have my salary, I'm thinking of sponsoring someone like Anshul sponsored me, and my life changed. In the same way, I want to sponsor a child, and I want to bring some changes in one's life because of me. Maybe that's the meaning of being born in. Being a human being, so I want to do that.
Sorry, we missed the opening hymn, Lean on Me, but well, let's go on to the next hymn, We Would Be One, number 318.
Would be one, and we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that thing which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service with love and justice strive to make us free.
In honor of Pride Month, the Social Justice Committee has chosen to collect money today for the LGBTQ+ youth at Kingston Middle School and the Gay Straight Alliance Club at the Choice Academy. We're also collecting your extra arts and crafts supplies for these youth. There's a box in the foyer this morning, and the box will be at the office through the end of the month. If you're visiting for the first time, please feel free to let the baskets pass you by. You are our guest, and we are happy that you're with us. Will the ushers please come forward to collect the offering? Thank you for your gifts.
Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Father's Day. And I guess it's sad, Juneteenth Day. I have a hard time celebrating Juneteenth, but I will observe it. And I have a confession. My sermon's too long. So I'm just as glad that we didn't do that one extra hymn. But my real confession is that in my formative years, we lived in Japan. Thank you. That's much better. Well, so in my formative years, we lived in Japan. My father was in the Navy, a doctor, and one day my father was given temporary additional duty, ordering him to go to Taiwan to operate on President Chiang Kai-shek. While there, our family was escorted in a black limousine to a mountain village overlooking Taipei to be entertained by Aboriginal folk dances, or with Aboriginal folk dances. I was dressed to the nines and stuck out like a sore thumb. Immediately upon arrival, I saw a girl my age, barefoot, and dressed in rags. When our eyes met, we both looked away out of shame. She for her poverty, and I for my privilege. My heart ached to the point that I never revealed it to my parents. So at 15, I realized I was indulged and undeserving, and that it was a crapshoot, that girl wasn't the privileged one and I the impoverished. Veritably, ovarian roulette. At this point, the only way I can help that girl in rags is to help other children in rags. So I refuse to take any type of remuneration for my work, my time, my travel, or my expenses. For me, it's not a job. It's not charity. It's penance. Nor would it be penance if I were rich. So I am very careful with my money and our sponsors' money because I want everyone to benefit. Our kids, educated and successful. The schools we use, rewarded for good teaching. Our staff, meaningful employment. Our board, a sense of purpose. And our sponsors, satisfaction, joy, and fulfillment. So this sermon is just one man's interpretation of what is help, real help. And I hope that it in some ways helps. To begin with, in 1994, at the ripe old age of 47, I was invited to volunteer in a charity hospital for children in Kathmandu as a physician's assistant. I realized that I waited so long, because I knew I lacked the wisdom and life experience my journey would require. And so my time at the hospital was as fulfilling as it was mind-blowing. I witnessed a wide range of real pathology, one pus-oozing bone infection after another as a result of inadequate and delayed treatments. Open fires in the homes for cooking and heating yielded a rash of hideous burns and disabilities from young children falling into the fires. I saw dozens of club feet that were ignored for so long that they required radical surgeries and rehabilitation. If malnutrition, measles, and diarrhea don't kill them by the age of 5, something else would, like meningitis, TB, or sepsis. David Werner, author of Where There Is No Doctor, described it this way. There's a fast-flowing river and doctors are stationed on the banks. And they're leaping into the water and swimming out to children floating by, frantically flailing their arms as they are drowning. The doctors grab hold and haul them back onto the shore and resuscitate them. But once the child is revived, the doctors must immediately jump back into the river to rescue yet another. So busy saving children being washed downstream, no one is able to go upstream and see who it is that is pushing them off the bridge. So, 3 years later, when I returned, this time with my partner, Mary Jane, I should say my late partner, Mary Jane, to once again volunteer at the hospital, I was asking myself, what was pushing these children off the bridge? How could I offer real help other than just assisting in surgeries? Understanding and addressing the real need. Together, Mary Jane and I came to know a little girl in Kathmandu who was minding her mother's shop. Each evening when we returned from our duties at the hospital. Little Uma was about 8 years old and in the 3rd grade. The shop was simply a woven tray, whereupon individual cigarettes were placed upon it for a penny apiece. Uma had already studied the required year of English in school by this time and pointed to a flower and spelled out Flower, but not quite that fast. She didn't know how to pronounce it, and that was the extent of the English she was going to learn in a public school. And so, with Uma's mother's permission, we placed little Uma in a private school where she could learn English. Private schools teach in English, the language of the professions, but for that, she would have to be placed back in the 1st grade to learn to speak it. And sure enough, in 3 years, she was fluent and had skipped 2 grades and was in the 5th grade, catching up to the grade level where she should have been to begin with. By the next year, she was tops in her class, competing against high-caste wealthy children. We were totally blown away. In following Uma's progress, I learned that health and hygiene was indeed taught in the primary schools. Every school kid knows how to wash a wound and to boil water before drinking it. It's the parents who are never educated, especially in rural Nepal, that have no grasp of germ theory. So how could I help? I knew better than to try to educate adults. It's just too hard. I've studied a dozen languages, and I still speak only one fluently. But then I remembered how my own daughter had trained me to buckle up before driving her to kindergarten. She called me on it one day. "That's not fair, Dad. I have to wear a seatbelt." I then thought of how many kids must be a factor in getting their parents to quit smoking. "I love you. Please, please stop. I don't want you to die, Mom." How can you argue against that? So if I could educate kids, they undoubtedly would pay it forward and educate their parents about hygiene. "Mom, we're out of soap." And heck, in 20 years, those babes would be parents themselves, educated and able to prevent children from falling into that river. I thought of Aesop's mouse, our little Uma, who, after being spared by the king of beasts, was able to gnaw through the net and free me from my conundrum. And so, in 2001, I had my answer. I would help by going upstream, find bright young minds like Uma, and give them a jump on life, and bring health information and hygiene to the unschooled, including their parents and their siblings. The fact that 600 families of our students persevered so much better than the rest of the country during the pandemic is evidence of this. Remember, we are educating the poorest kids in Nepal. None of our kids died, just one parent and a couple of uncles and aunts. How to really help? but encountering the difficulties of helping. So as I said, Uma's progress was amazing. But we soon learned that her progress was riddled with potholes that needed to be filled. We knew from the outset that her birth was never registered. We knew from the outset that Uma's father had abandoned the family at her birth. We later discovered that her birth, in fact, was never registered. So not only did she not know her birthday, she wasn't sure how old she was. She was a non-entity, which meant we would have to track down her father somehow to get her registered, which we were able to do years later. So after being abandoned, her mother had come to Kathmandu and was successful in finding yet another man to support her. But once Uma's two stepbrothers were born, the gadfly flew off to another woman across town, leaving mother to now support 3 kids. And so the cigarette store, that little woven mat with the cigarettes on it, was conceived out of desperation. Shortly after we placed Uma in the private school, the stepfather then returned and jerked her out of school. So with the mother's permission, we gained custody of Uma and transferred her to a private school where she could be boarded, beyond the control of her stepfather. Through all this, Uma plugged on year after year to finally become a registered nurse. From this, we learned that we needed to uncover the full story of each child before committing support. Real help is not just putting them in school, but keeping them in school. Otherwise, all is for naught. But there are even bigger potholes. All of our families are dirt poor and live on the razor's edge of a medical catastrophe. Thank God I'm a PA. But by keeping a close eye on the academic process, we could catch an injury or illness early, catch them before they hit the water. A simple Band-Aid with iodine or an antibiotic would quell an infection before it becomes septic. Our principles can help us with this. Sadiksha, however, got by us. She went off the bridge and over a waterfall. You can see why I need an emotional support animal, don't you? I'm okay, really. I'm like this every time I do this. It's like flashback. Unbelievably, I caught her before she hit the rocks below. We actually cured her leukemia with a 3-year regimen of chemo for just $7,000 instead of the usual $100,000. And so with her, we started a cancer fund in addition to our medical fund. Our second cancer intervention wasn't as successful, and despite 2 amputations, we lost Teju to bone cancer. We were all heartbroken. But what's this? Her little sister, Dispu, was also bright and just as spunky as Teju, and her sponsors gladly transferred their support to her. So Teju's legacy lives on in Dipsu. Our third cancer intervention saved a mother with uterine cancer, so her child did not have to drop out of school to care for the family. We have had several pediatric surgeries, all successful, and several spinal surgeries. Sajan broke his back when he leaned against a railing on the roof deck of the school that had rotted out, imagine, at the school, and fell down 3 stories backwards. Amazingly, after a year of surgeries and rehab, he succeeded in returning to school this year. Nirmaya is sponsored by D. McComb. I diagnosed her with severe scoliosis at the age of 3 in a little bamboo clinic that we had erected on a riverbank occupied by squatters. I referred Nirmaya to the Children's Hospital where Mary Jane and I volunteered. They fused some critical vertebrae, but we all had to wait until she stopped growing to address her, to surgically correct it. This made her stooped over as she grew. Imagine being a hunchback in high school. But somehow, she had an indomitable spirit, as she was always smiling and laughing. That summer after graduating, she had her operation and grew 5 inches by the end of the day. And so, to really help, one has to do what's needed to finish the job and keep them in school. But even beyond these medical catastrophes, there lurked more potholes. Nepalis are just like everyone else, but their lives are much more tragic due to the lack of resources. So we provide tutoring for academic problems and all kinds of counseling, career counseling for our students, marital counseling for bickering parents, emotional support for depression and anxiety. We've had suicide attempts, all unsuccessful, and are doing well. Even one boy was falsely accused of rape and incarcerated until acquitted. So we have learned a lot. So we learned a lot in our first 5 years. But over the next 17 years, we have fine-tuned our program. We install kids in school and fully support them, come what may, with but one caveat: so long as you work hard. If they were your children, isn't that what you would do? Su niño es mi niño. That's what makes a global village. How about too much help? Now, there is one thing about help we all need to recognize, and that is too much help can become a disincentive, disempowering and enabling the student or family. But that's not all. Our principals of our private schools know that good marks are a precondition to receiving payments from us. Hence, some principals began forging high marks for underperforming students, under the pretense, of course, of, well, we wanted them to remain in school. So in addition to simply trusting the report cards, we had to verify the performance. Right on, Reagan. Trust and verify. So twice a year, we visit over 100 schools in 55 of the 77 districts in Nepal. And you can imagine what that terrain is like. Just to check up on the children. We closely observe them as they read and write letters in English to their sponsors. We also show movies, as Herb explained, with these school visits. And these are followed by film discussions. These discussions help them overcome their shyness and develop their analytical skills, social consciousness, and self-confidence. All the while, we are assessing their speaking ability. And I say this because if you didn't know, throughout the third world, the developing world, the mode of education is simply rote learning. Okay? They memorize, they memorize, they memorize. They never think, they have no imaginations. And so it's really important to get these children together to bounce ideas off each other. The Goldilocks dilemma. Not too much help, but not too little either. What good is an education if one simply learns to read, but can only become a literate domestic servant or porter? How much education is needed to really impact their livelihoods? Kalyan, as Herb was talking about, introduced, was our oldest student at the time. And so was the first one to demonstrate that the secondary education just wasn't enough. He had worked his way through high school at a tourist agency, so we supported him until he achieved a business diploma And with that, he was promoted. He could be promoted to becoming an agent, a travel agent. After a few years, he went on to Dubai and became a corporate accountant. He then returned to Nepal and set up his own tourist agency, as well as his own charity, and became president of our board in Nepal. So we decided so Kalyan convinced us that we would support our students fully in their career quest and see just how far they could fly. But to what end? To what end do we help? Are we helping an individual? Are we helping their family? Or are we trying to help the society as a whole? I was soon coming to realize that there was indeed thousands of other kids like Uma, who, if given a chance, would soar like eagles. If Answer could just harness enough of them as we, like Archimedes, would have a lever long enough to tilt Nepal. By producing an army of proactive, socially conscious leaders, they could infiltrate the corrupt power structure and change society. And so we began promoting our students not to emigrate, but to stay in Nepal to model and institute change. But how? And it was then that someone reminded me of a movie. So we used Pay It Forward in our film discussions. The kids loved it and could identify with Trevor. The poverty around him, the bullying at school, the desire to change the world for the better, and I began to obsess over the idea of Pay It Forward. Here's a little clip. Do you all know the movie Pay It Forward?
You take the things that you don't like about this world and you flip them upside down, and you can start that today.
That's me, and that's 3 people, and I'm going to help them. Then they do it for 3 other people, then they do it for 3 more.
Pretty simple. It's a pyramid scheme flipped upside down. Instead of people taking advantage of the system, they donate to a system that is helpful and promotes change. So we encourage our students not to just pay us back by helping their own families, but to pay it forward by supporting a student of their own, just like they were supported by their sponsors. So, some are, some can and will, some try and can't, but all want to. For them, it's simply a matter of being able to afford the cost. How to convince them? What's in it for them? And I began to explore happiness. But that's another sermon. So in conclusion, our boys and girls are carefully vetted, and they go far when given the chance. Real help not only instills hope, but initiative. And as I and many of our sponsors can attest, they do succeed in our joy and our sources of great joy, happiness, and fulfillment. Our administrator recently received this note from a woman whose father had just passed away. Dear Lisa, thank you very much for your kind and personal note, along with your sympathy, love, and condolences. My dad, Paul, spoke highly of Answer and was honored to support Tristy in her grades 6 through 12. He looked forward with great anticipation to her bi-yearly letters and photos, and following her academic progress and getting to know her and watch her grow gave him great joy. And it's very clear that Tristy considered our dad her grandfather, and he cared and considered her as his granddaughter. Tristy's enclosed letter was a precious gift. Please enclose our response letter to Tristy in your next mailing. In Dad's last day or two, I brought Tristy's youthful picture, his favorite, for him to see one last time. It warmed his heart and brought him a smile. Fondly, Gwen. I opted to bring you stories rather than explain just how we run a unique program in America. In America, private schools run about $500 a week. In Nepal, they are $500 a year. We don't charge for the administration costs. Our board fundraises for that. Simply put, we are the most affordable, the most effective, and the most caring NGO in the caring village, in the global village. Excuse me. And that should be my sales pitch. But what I really want is for people to experience the joy and the happiness and the fulfillment of helping others in real need and to see them really succeed. That is why Answer is called the Happiness NGO. Thank you. Namaste.
So our closing hymn is This Is My Song, number 159. Please repeat after me as I extinguish our flaming chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
My prop. We are social animals, aren't we? And therefore, help is a human imperative. It is the foundation of what really matters, which is why it is a great source of joy, happiness, and fulfillment. Our children and grandchildren make us happy because we devote whatever resources are necessary to really help them. We would do whatever we could to give them a good education and every advantage. To be able to give others in dire circumstances that opportunity for dimes rather than dollars is no less fulfilling and joyful. Let us go out into the world and see how we can really help as well as to lend a hand. Namaste, Dhanyabad.